There'd been whispers all morning. Someone new was being called to testify, not an accuser, not a whistleblower, a father, a partner, a voice long silenced. When Al B. Sure walked into the courtroom, it wasn't with swagger. It was with weight. He wore a black suit, no jewelry, no smile. His eyes were low, his steps were careful, and in his hand was a letter, folded twice, edges worn, like it had been carried for years. Diddy didn't flinch when he saw him, but everyone else did, because everyone knew who Kim Porter was. And now her ex was about to speak. Al B. Sure didn't ask for water, didn't shift in his seat. He adjusted the mic and said quietly, "I've waited a long time for this." The courtroom was still. "I'm not here to throw dirt. I'm here to speak on behalf of someone who can't." He reached into his jacket, pulled out the letter, and placed it on the table. "This is from Kim, written in 2006. The judge glanced toward the bailiff. Al didn't move. "She gave this to me before she moved back in with Sean, told me to hold it in case anything ever happened." And now he was ready to read it. At first it was just business, then it was charm, then control. Kim's words, read by Al, filled the room. She talked about being isolated, about friends who stopped calling, about trips that turned into strategic appearances. One line stood out. "He says I'm nothing without him, that I owe him everything. But what about my name, my voice, my soul?" Al's voice cracked when he got to that part, and for the first time, Diddy's lead counsel raised an objection. Irrelevant and speculative. But the judge allowed it. The letter wasn't hearsay, it was testament, and Al was delivering it like a eulogy. "She tried to leave 3 times. The prosecution leaned in. "In 2004, she packed bags, called her mother, but he sent people, said it was just a disagreement. In 2006, she booked a hotel under another name. He showed up there within hours." The gallery shifted. You could feel people calculating, connecting dots. Al paused. "The last time was in 2018. Silence. She told me she didn't feel safe." And that line changed everything. The judge asked for clarification. Al gave it. "Did she say she was being physically harmed?" Al B. Sure paused, but she said she felt watched, controlled, that things were happening to people around her, people she trusted. He leaned closer to the mic. "She said if anything ever happened to her, people should start asking questions." That's when the courtroom truly shifted, because Kim Porter didn't die from a car accident. She died suddenly, unexpectedly, in her own home, and until now, nobody had ever spoken under oath about what she feared most. The courtroom lights flickered slightly as the technician adjusted the mic. Al B. Sure had already been sworn in, but the real weight didn't come until he leaned into that mic and said without hesitation, "Kim Porter should still be alive." And then came the pivot, and if you're asking me why she's not, I can only tell you what I saw, what I was told, and what I feared for years. He wasn't just a witness, he was a grieving man, a man who once loved Kim, shared a child with her, and, according to his testimony, spent the last 2 years of her life trying to figure out why she seemed afraid. "There were calls at night," he said, panicked, untraceable numbers, her voice trembling. "And when I asked if it was about Puff, she'd always say the same thing. 'Don't make me answer that.'" Al didn't speak in riddles. He painted the timeline clearly. He described the shift in Kim's energy after a trip to Diddy's home in 2016, right around the time he was dealing with internal revolt drama and suppressing rumors about a lifestyle blog that almost outed him. She came back from that weekend quiet, withdrawn, like someone who saw something she couldn't unsee. He tried to follow up, but Kim, always protective, kept him out of it. "I think she knew I'd act reckless if I ever found out the truth." "What truth?" The prosecution pressed gently. That's when Al dropped it. "She told me there was a storage unit in LA, a place where things were kept, photos, contracts, recordings. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should find it." He paused. "It was cleared out 3 days after she died." The room stopped breathing. Even the judge blinked in surprise. Al said he tried to access the unit using a contact Kim had named in a notarized document. "But when I got there, it was already stripped clean. Surveillance footage? Gone. Keycard access? Wiped." He then mentioned a phone call from a mutual friend, someone still unnamed, who warned him not to pursue it further. "He told me I was already being watched, that I should let sleeping dogs lie." Al looked around the courtroom. "But I didn't. I couldn't. Not with Quincy asking questions. Not with Kim gone." It was the first time Quincy Brown's name was mentioned, and it hit hard. The gallery murmured again. Al was calm but cutting. He walked the jury through the days leading up to Kim's death. Texts that suddenly stopped. Voicemails she never returned, and a final call 2 days before she died. She sounded like she was saying goodbye. Then came the detail that shook the room. She mentioned signing something. Said she had to go meet Puff's team at the studio, finalize some old stuff for the estate. The prosecution raised an eyebrow. "Did she say what estate?" Al nodded. "She said it was about who owned what, rights, property, legacy." And then that meeting never happened. At least not officially, but she was dead 48 hours later. There was no accusation of murder, Al made that clear, but what he did say was this: "People are too scared to call things by their name. I'm not. I think Kim was silenced, maybe not by a hand, but by a system that didn't want her speaking. He cited instances when she tried to start her own production label, tried to write a book. Puff discouraged it, told her the timing wasn't right, told her it would dredge up things that didn't need revisiting. He looked the prosecution dead in the eye. But those things were real, and she lived them, and she was ready to tell her story. And now, she never would. The courtroom stayed frozen as Al B. Sure took a breath. After Kim died, I wasn't the only one asking questions, he said. Her friends were scared, her family quiet, and every time someone spoke up, they got shut down fast. He turned slightly toward the gallery, addressing nobody and everybody. You know how this industry works. You don't have to be told to stay silent, you just feel it. Then he looked back at the jury. But Quincy, he never stopped asking. That's when Al revealed something most people didn't know. He tried to get her autopsy reopened quietly. He filed it under a different name, went through a back channel, but the paperwork stalled. Someone kept blocking it. The prosecution asked for clarification. Are you alleging interference in a legal inquiry? Al didn't flinch. I'm saying Puff had reach, and he used it. He described how the initial toxicology report came back clean. No drugs, no alcohol, nothing strange, just pneumonia, but the timeline didn't add up. Kim was healthy, fit. She had a checkup 10 days before and got a clean bill of health. He then added something chilling. There was a second draft of that report, one with anomalies. It never made it to the press. The courtroom leaned in. I only saw it once. A friend in the coroner's office said it listed trace amounts of a sedative, something not usually screened unless you're looking for it. At this point, Diddy's team was shifting in their seats. One of them whispered something to his lead counsel. The judge banged once for silence, but let Al continue. That same friend told me the lab that handled Kim's sample lost the blood work, claimed it was contaminated. Gone, just like that. He shook his head. This ain't conspiracy, this is pattern. He pointed to the jury again, and I've seen that pattern before. When people get close to speaking out, something always happens. And I think Kim got close. The prosecution asked one more question. Mr. Brown, why come forward now? He looked at the judge, the jury, and finally at the empty seat where Kim would have been. Because silence didn't protect her, and it won't protect the rest of us either. The prosecution circled back to a recurring name, Quincy, Kim Porter's son, the boy Diddy adopted, the boy Al B. Sure had fathered. And it was Al's relationship with Quincy that cracked open the next layer. He told the court they kept Quincy out of the loop. When Kim died, that boy had questions. He still does. He spoke about private messages, Quincy reaching out, saying things didn't add up, that the timelines weren't lining up, that the grief felt manufactured because it had nowhere to land. And then Al handed the judge a printout of an Instagram draft, one Quincy had written, but never posted. Dear Mom, it began, I don't believe you just died. The post described a phone call one Quincy allegedly received at 2 a.m. from a number he didn't recognize. A cold voice on the other end said simply, she's gone. No emotion, no explanation, no family present. Al said Quincy showed it to him, asking, do you think they were trying to scare me? The gallery stirred. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was fear. The prosecutor asked if Quincy ever suspected foul play. Al didn't flinch. Yes, he did, and I do too. That's when Al paused. He asked the judge for a moment. His hands were shaking, and then he said what the gallery wasn't ready for. There was a letter Kim wrote. The courtroom froze. Al explained it wasn't found in her purse or her bedroom. It was emailed to her attorney, dated just 10 days before her death. I didn't see it until months later, Al said, but once I did, I couldn't sleep. He looked at the prosecutor and nodded. Well, it's time. The judge allowed a short recess to authenticate the document. When court resumed, the letter was ruled admissible in redacted form. It began, if anything happens to me, make sure Quincy knows I loved him and that I was trying to leave. She wrote about wanting out, about being followed, about a shadow presence in her home. She didn't name Diddy directly, but she said, I know who I'm dealing with, and they don't let go easy. The gallery went silent again, as if someone had sucked all the air out of the room. Al B. Sure sat back down, his eyes rimmed red. I failed her, he whispered. I should have done more. The prosecutor asked, what do you believe happened to Kim Porter? Al looked up, his voice didn't shake. I believe she was silenced. I believe it was strategic, and I believe the people behind it are in this room, watching. Diddy didn't look at him. He stared straight ahead, stone still, waiting for it all to pass, but this time, it wasn't going to. Al B. Sure took a sip of water, eyes never leaving the floor. For a second, it looked like he might stop there. That maybe this was the limit. But then he looked up, calm, steady, and said, there was another time a few years before Kim passed, she called me from a blocked number. The room sat still. She was whispering, said she couldn't talk long, but she told me she was scared, said she was thinking of leaving and that she didn't know who to trust anymore. I asked if it was about Puff. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. The prosecution asked him to clarify what she meant by leaving. He didn't say the word escape, but it lingered in the air. They asked if he had any proof of the call, any recording messages, even timestamps. Number, she didn't want it traced. But then he added something else. She mailed me a letter once. It was about custody, but it also hinted at fear. She said, if anything ever happens to me, don't let Quincy think it was his fault. He paused, let that land. It didn't make sense at the time. Now I read it different. A murmur stirred through the courtroom, that kind of low, uncomfortable realization that you're hearing something that changes the shape of everything else. The defense objected to the letter being mentioned without presenting it. The judge agreed, asked Al B. Shore to confirm if he still had it. I gave it to Quincy when he turned 18. I didn't think I'd ever have to explain it like this. They asked if Quincy had read it. He never wanted to talk about it. He folded it up and tucked it away. The prosecution asked if he believed Kim Porter had been preparing for something, trying to leave something behind. Al didn't answer with words. He just nodded, quiet but sure. Then came the mention of the hospital. Al B. Shore leaned forward. Kim had this thing where she hated hospitals, would only go if it was serious. That's why I was shocked when she went in for those flu symptoms, and even more shocked when she was gone 2 days later. The prosecution brought up the coroner's report, lobar pneumonia, but Al B. Shore pushed back, gently but firmly. She told me she was getting better. She said it felt like the worst had passed. She was planning a trip. Then suddenly she was gone. I've never stopped thinking about that. He didn't accuse anyone outright. He didn't have to. The prosecution asked if he was suggesting foul play. He answered like someone who had sat with this too long. I'm saying she was trying to build a way out, and every time she tried, something pulled her back in. That's not pneumonia, that's pressure. The judge reminded the court these were personal recollections, not confirmed evidence. But the room had already shifted. The facts might be soft, but the weight of his testimony was undeniable. And the questions were only getting louder. The prosecution circled back to the timeline. Mr. Brown, when did you last speak to Kim directly? Al didn't hesitate. A week before she passed, she told me she was tired, not sick, tired. She said she'd been waking up feeling watched, like something wasn't right in the house. Did she mention anyone specifically? Al hesitated. She didn't name him, but she said she felt like she was being punished for something, like she'd made the wrong call and now had to live with it. The courtroom felt colder after that, and then the prosecution asked about Quincy. What was his reaction when she passed? Al swallowed hard. He shut down. Quincy always kept things close, but this broke something in him. He told me it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't say. Did you get the sense he knew something? Al blinked. I think he felt something. Kids always know, even when they don't understand it. And the way things moved after she died, how fast they wrapped everything up, it didn't sit right with him. The prosecution shifted. Let's talk about the funeral. You've spoken publicly about how you weren't invited. Is that correct? Al nodded. That was my son's mother, and I had to find out about the funeral through a third party. I wasn't even allowed near the front. Do you believe that was intentional? I know it was. People wanted me quiet, wanted the cameras focused on one version of her story. And what version was that? That she was happy, that it was peaceful, that there was nothing more to see. He looked away. But I knew better. They moved to motives. Mr. Brown, in your opinion, why would anyone want to silence Kim? Al exhaled, steady but warned. Because she knew too much, because she had receipts, and because she wasn't afraid to start talking when it finally got too heavy. He looked toward the gallery, not at anyone in particular. She once told me, it's not about what they did to me, it's what they think they can keep doing. That quote hit like a quiet bomb. No objections this time. Then came the final question. If Kim Porter were alive today, what do you think she would say to this court? Al's voice softened. She'd tell you she tried, that she gave the best years of her life to people who thought they owned her, and when she finally tried to walk away, they made sure the door shut behind her. The courtroom didn't breathe for a moment. And now, he said, I'm just here so the door doesn't stay shut. The judge called for a recess, 10 minutes, just enough time for the courtroom to exhale. People didn't speak much. No side conversations. Even the guards stood still like they weren't sure what they were guarding anymore. When everyone returned, the room felt heavier, like something sacred had been cracked open. The prosecution resumed, but they shifted tone. No more back and forth, just a playback of facts, dates, interviews, news clippings. Al sat silently while the court played a 2019 clip where he claimed he'd been in a coma during Kim's funeral. The defense objected again. Irrelevant, but the judge allowed it. State of mind is in question, he said. The clip ended and the prosecutor turned back to Al. Were you ever contacted about an investigation into her death? No. Did you request one? I did, publicly, but nothing came of it. No autopsy details, no follow-up, just a statement and a sealed report. They wanted it closed. Who's they? Oh, I think we all know who I mean. He didn't say the name, but the implication wrapped around the room like a noose. The defense finally stood. Their tone was cold, clipped. Mr. Brown, are you suggesting that a global music icon orchestrated the death of his former partner? Al didn't flinch. I'm saying she didn't die the way they said she did. Do you have proof? Number, but I have questions, and I know for a fact so did she. The judge reminded the room that allegations without evidence remain allegations. But the seed was planted and the jury looked shaken. The prosecution had one more play, a journal entry. Al confirmed the handwriting. It was Kim's. March 11th, 2018, he read aloud. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be free, not from the house, from the silence. The courtroom was silent again, this time out of respect. Al's hands trembled as he handed the page back. I never wanted this in court, but she deserved to be heard. And somehow in that moment, she was. As court adjourned for the day, no one moved. Diddy didn't look up. His lawyers packed up slowly, like the floor might collapse under their feet. Reporters outside were already typing headlines. They wouldn't say what was proven, only what was said, what was felt, and what couldn't be unsaid. Al stepped out of the witness box and glanced back once, not at Diddy, but at the empty seat where Kim would have sat if things had gone differently. Then he left quietly. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Al didn't stop for interviews. He walked with his head down, flanked by two family members. Someone shouted a question. Do you think justice will ever come? He didn't answer. But the pause before he entered the car said everything. It was a long one.